Get started. And I'll call the meeting, and I'm calling to order the recessed meeting that started on May 3rd. So we'll be picking back up from the agenda that was the regular meeting on May 3rd. And the only item on that agenda that I know that we have the need for revisiting, at least on one I think at this point, would be item 5, which is going to be a continuation of our indoor pool update and financing discussions. And if you'll recall, that evening, our consultants provided some information, and our manager and finance director went over those with us about locking in some financing rates. We took action, and so they're going to give us an update on that process and tell us where we're at. And I think we may also have a resolution that's required to be adopted that's here also. So, Mr. Adams, I'll turn it over to you to pick back up where you left off last time.
So, what you have in front of you, you should have the paper copies. One is just a letter from my office to Tony Blaylock with the Local Government Commission, and then also that should be a bound packet, and then also a resolution. Um, I won't read word for word going through the letter. I'm just providing the board updated information, the public updated information. This is a letter to Mr. Blaylock with the Local Government Commission, basically stating that the county is considering issuing $20 million general obligation bonds, that Davenport and Company is our financial advisor, and Bob Jessup and Ashley Anderson is our, Sanford Holzhauser is our bond counsel. And then ultimately just talks about the direct loan approach is more timely than a public sale given to the volatile interest rate. And then describes that we did receive 4 proposals. This is something that Mr. Blaylock had already approved. He just wanted, this is just an informal application that we sent to the LGC. I wanted to provide this to the public and to you all because this gives you something in hand. If somebody asks you, what did we just do? This gives a nice little description. Also, what was provided to us was just an updated summary of the bids. If you recall, we were receiving bids literally the day of our last meeting. And so all they did was throw in the Webster Bank bid information here. So if anybody asks you about the banks who bid, what the information is, I just provided you a copy of this. You can also refer them online. This information is online now. And then ultimately, if you recall, we showed you the actual terms and conditions presented to this board that you voted to approve. I just wanted to show you that I did sign off and submit that in, and we did lock in the interest rate. As of last Friday, if you remember, we had till May 6th to do this. I sent this in May 3rd, but as of Friday, they did. Remember, everything was pending, dependent upon approval of our credit rating, so forth. So the bank did lock in the interest rate Friday. Everything is moving forward as planned. And so that's the first set of information. The other set of information, I do believe we mentioned to you all, this is the reason you recessed, that the Local Government Commission would like for this board to adopt and authorize a resolution. That is the second information here that I am asking that the board basically take action on. And pretty much it is pretty much just resolving that the county made the preliminary determination to issue the general obligation bonds, and be further resolved that the board directs the county manager, finance officer, and all other county representatives to take all appropriate action steps to obtain LGC approval and to complete the financing, and that the board ratify all prior actions taken towards accomplishing these purposes.
And I think it might be important to reiterate why some of the numbers are what they are, and the number is what it is, I should say, and the process itself. If you'll recall, we had on the ballot, and the citizens of Jackson County voted to say that they would be willing for us to use bonds to fund a government project, which we have to have approval by the voters to do such. Would that be a correct statement?
To sell GO bonds, you must have approval of the voters, yes.
And we, in that resolution that was voted, a referendum that was voted on by the public, it said that we could issue up to 20 million.
Correct.
And so that's sort of where this number comes from. And I know our discussions have been about what the cost of the pool is going to be eventually. And that number sort of floated around a little bit on estimates, and we'll get a real firm idea on June
Second.
2nd. So I think going forward, I just want to make sure everyone understands, all we legally can apply for on a loan would be the 20 million. That's what was approved by the voters under government bonds. Any other monies above that 20 million will become through a series of other means. We could cash it or whatever our staff was going to recommend, how we come up with the balance.
Yes, sir. And just, I appreciate you going a little history. Since this will be a separate video, I think, online, will this be a separate video? Or will you combine this? Okay. Just a reminder, the reason this was brought before the board was because interest rates are drastically increasing. We were not slated to sell those bonds until June 28th, and it was being recommended to us by our financial consultants and even by the local government commission themselves for us to go ahead and proceed forward and lock these rates down, because we all felt like if we did not lock down the 3.228 rate at this point, then we would be subject to higher interest rates come June.
It went up the next day.
Yes.
High,
Yeah.
he said the high was like
Yes.
$800,000, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
So thank you for doing that. Saved us and our citizens.
But I wanted to point that out because if this was not limited, the easy solution would be to say, well, let's just borrow this amount that we need, but we're sort of locked in, restricted on the amount.
Yeah. And yes, sir. And we will open bids June 2nd. The next major decision coming before this board will be the first meeting in June. I believe it's June 7th. We're also going to talk about the budget calendar today. And so I am going to ask us to prepare to meet, and this may coincide with our budget calendar also, to discuss the bids themselves and opening of the bids, because as we all recall, we have till June 17th to take advantage of this interest rate. And so ultimately, when the bids are open, we will know at that point what our next steps need.
Okay. Any other questions about this financing? All right. Well, we've heard from staff the request that we adopt Resolution R22-09, and this is a resolution of the Jackson County Board of Commissioners supporting an application to the Local Government Commission for its approval of $20 million bank placement general obligation bonds. What would be the pleasure of the board concerning this resolution? Someone like to put forward a motion to approve it?
I move that we accept this resolution as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any question or discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I just want one other thing so everybody understands. This is locking in the interest rate.
Correct.
The board will make another decision on whether or not to proceed forward with this loan at a later date.
Correct.
Yep.
That's a good point to make. All right, any other questions or comments? Hearing none from the board, Madam Clerk, if you'd call the roll, please.
Commissioner Deeds?
Yes.
Commissioner Woody?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Strickland?
Yes.
Chairman Magnet?
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you.
Is there any other items, Mr. Manager, on this recessed agenda that we reconvened?
No, sir.
Okay, do I have a motion from the board that we adjourn the May 3rd meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. Now, at this time, I'm going to go ahead and call to order the work session of the Jackson County Board of Commissioners today, May the 10th. As you see before you, there is a published agenda which has 4 items on it. The most important item is item 4, the adjournment one. I think we all want to get to at some point. But there is a need to amend this agenda. I've been told by staff that we need to take off item 3A which is the municipal grant application update. There is still some additional information that needs to come in before we can be able to continue that conversation. So let's strike 3A from the agenda. Any other changes? All right, hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any question or discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Adams for item 1, who will continue us with our safety discussions and introduce those that'll be speaking.
Yes, sir. So, as you can see by the agenda, I am going to start, and my intentions are to basically go over the numbers, provide some numbers to this board. It's a follow-up to some of the requests and discussions that this board held in regards to safety issues, and that involves the Silva Fire Department, but also other areas of the rescue squad, EMS, and things of that nature. I did request Town Manager Paige Dowling come before the board. You'll see that she is on the agenda, and there's also information there that she'll be provide to the board in relation to their request. So just having said that, I'll just go ahead and jump into attachment 1. And again, it's a spreadsheet here, and I'm just going to highlight some of the things. I recommend that you go back and look at the spreadsheet. If you got any questions, please follow up to me, and I'll be happy to answer them. This initial section here, this first section was actually provided by the town, and what this is really doing is it's just coming up with personnel costs associated with 8 employees going full-time at the Silva Fire Department. It's looking at 10 employees, 11 employees, and 12 employees. A couple things, you can see how they broke it out, wages and salary and overtime. I think some of the discussions when Silva presents their request to you will involve potential overtime cost, and that's going to be related to how they shift and things of that nature. But you'll see that the information being provided by the town of Silva, they went out and hired a professional firm to come in and make recommendations, and that recommendation is in your packets today. But you just go through, and ultimately it's self-explanatory, but just look at the grand total cost. If you look at 8 full-time employees, grand total cost is $732,838. And then 11 employees, $850,160. You notice I bolded those 2 items because ultimately you'll see that the town of Silva's request is for 11 employees. And the reality is as we get in discussions, you'll see that really it'll center around either 11 employees or 8 employees. So that's the reason I just bolded and highlighted those numbers. If you jump down to this middle box, what this middle box does is it just pretty much point blank tells you what the total request from Jackson County would be if you chose to move forward with either the request or funding 8 employees. So you can see for 8 employees, the total budget is $1,321,515, in which $1,074,290 would be from Jackson County. Now, what that includes is costs that we're already funding. Remember, we got into that conversation a little bit about last time. Does that include full-time, not full-time? So I've answered that. But ultimately, the reason I want to point this out is that ultimately would be the budget you would be approving if you chose to go with either 8 employees or 11 employees. So the final column here that you're looking at here is what this is doing is really talking about what additional county funds are needed in order to fund these requests. So ultimately, all I'm doing is if you're taking the personnel cost, taking the shore up amounts, and this is just basically taking into consideration all the monies we're already funding versus the budget request, and taking all that in consideration, we do have to add another $45,386, and then that $135,012 is numbers that Ms. Fox provided to me as far as if we remove the existing personnel cost. So in order to fund the request, for 8 employees, it would be $643,212 from the county. And then I'll just jump down to 11 employees would be an additional $760,535 from the county. And I went ahead and associated that with a tax rate for future conversations. So ultimately, that 0.0055, it's technically a little over a half a cent on the property tax, okay? And if you look at the 0.0065, obviously it's also a little over a half a cent. So that's less than 1 cent on the tax rate. And so what I wanted to do is just provide a summary so that as you as a board start discussing and, whether you make decisions today or not, that's neither here nor there, but this is good information for you to keep as you're discussing. A couple other things I wanted to go ahead and provide to the,
Before you move on, I want to make sure that I understand this correctly. The first horizontal column is personnel only,
yes,
personnel costs, and then the second horizontal column would include operating expenses, fuel, truck payments, building payments, all that.
building everything.
Everything.
That is the total budget for all operations,
Equipment, everything.
everything. And then the county's part of that would be the 1 million stuff. But this bottom column is taking into consideration monies we're already paying some of that 1,074,000 or that 1,191,000. So it's taken into consideration. So this is showing in order to get to the 1,174,000, we need an additional 643,212 added to the budget. Does that make sense? And so what I tried to do when I was trying to make it a simple thought. When you're trying to go through 4 scenarios, and I'm trying to highlight 2, I think honestly it'll come down to 2 scenarios. That's the reason I was just trying to highlight the 8 employees and 11 employees and just focus on those 2 numbers. And when you look at the next pages, I don't take in consideration. I'm not showing you all 4 of these scenarios. I'm only showing you either 8 full-time employees or 11 full-time employees.
Okay.
The next page, and again, this is continuation of just the safety discussion. What this is doing is taking into consideration the new funds needed for the Harris wages, new funds needed for the Glenville Cashers EMS wages, the new funds needed for the loan. And I tell you, we're still shoring up this number. So this may change. It should change a little bit. We're hoping to get this loan locked in at a little bit below 4%, but I just don't have those numbers right now. We'll update those numbers before you adopt the budget, but ultimately we're still going to use the 343 at this point. I'm taking out the monies that were already obligated or budgeted to go towards debt payments for that building. And then ultimately you can see additional $723,275, or that's also a little over half a penny necessary, 0.62 of a penny necessary to accomplish those goals. Now, this isn't necessarily, it's really to throw it out here because what I didn't want to do is show you these potential tax increases without showing you the pool information. And we know what the pool is, assuming the bids come in, and they come in within budget, and we're able to proceed forward with the loan, which you just secured the interest rates. These are fairly accurate numbers right here. And so you can see that the debt service payment for what interest rate you just locked in is going to be $1,952,701. I went ahead and threw in operational costs just to show people that we're still talking about that. But for this year's conversation, we don't really need to talk about operational costs because that's an 18-month construction period. We won't be dealing with operational costs for 2 years from now. So the reality is we shouldn't be looking at taxes or anything of that nature this year. So when you break that information out, you can see this number. This is over a penny. So whereas the last 2 discussions we had were a little over half a penny each, this one is really over a penny and a half that we're talking about here. Now, if you were to try to budget the operational cost, at the same time, we're talking about 2 pennies. Now, I do want to point something out. What was presented to the just a reminder, what was presented to the public in this pool conversation that they voted on was actually 2.22 as compared to that 168. and then another 0.4. So this bottom number, when it was presented to the public, was looking at around yeah, that's backwards right there. It's 262. So that was a little bit higher what was presented to the public. So you're looking at 260. Yep. So it's a little bit higher. Oh, I'm sorry. It's 226. It's 226. So this is lower than what was presented to the public. What was presented to the public was 0.0226. So the point is what's being presented to you is less than what the public voted on. And then the final page, just so you know, what I'm attempting to do is just consolidate this whole conversation. And this is where, because I'm dealing with two situations, I have to provide two different totals. So all I'm doing here is in this first column here, just realize all that really is funding everything we just talked about, except not the operational cost for the pool, but 8 employees for the Silver Fire Department, and that brings the tax rate needed for that just under 3 cents, 2.85 cents. If you go 11 employees, that brings the overall tax rate still under 3 cents of 2.96. Now, I can go over these details, but all I'm doing is the only reason there's two columns, I'm just adding up everything you just saw in the past 3 pages. So I just want to show you the holistic picture of that. So, honestly, I guess for today's conversation, I've asked Paige to come talk to you about what their request is, and their request is for 11 employees, and for her to discuss that plan or that recommendation that's provided to her or to the town, and then for them to be here available to you for any questions.
Okay.
Any questions? Okay. Any question? We can come back to these numbers as much as we want. I just wanted to show everybody what we're talking about taxes, taking into consideration everything that we know today.
Okay. Very good.
All right. Well, the next item you do have in your books, and I'll recognize Ms. Dowling, but I'm going to go. Let me tell you the attachments here. This first attachment is the study that the town had done. These next 2 attachments are the full budgets for an 8 employee and the full budget for the 11 employee. So you can take these budgets and go back to my numbers and match up my numbers if you wanted to. But having said that, I'm just going to put it right here and recognize Ms. Dowling.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me. So first I want to start out with the need for a consultant on this. Quickly, I realized with the town not having ever operated a 24-hour department, our police department operates 24 hours, but they don't run 24-hour shifts, that with federal labor standards changes and there's so many options of ways we could run shifts, and we wanted a professional in the field to give us their recommendation, and also how do we make this transition from a split volunteer and paid department from an entirely volunteer department. So, and I also wanted them to look at our budget to see if we included the ancillary costs associated with a full 24-hour operation. And so I reached out to 2 firms that came highly recommended, and I selected Bucket Brigade Consultants. They'd worked with small towns and departments that had smaller, similar sized areas, and had provided staffing recommendations to several managers that I knew, and they came very, very highly recommended to us. So I'll let Mike talk a little bit more about them in a minute, but I want to get into their overall recommendation. So they came out and met with us, toured the facility, met with our HR and myself and Mike and Mallory. So let's see. Yeah, I'd like to point out, starting on page 29, but really 29 and 30 gets at their full recommendation. I was very happy with this report. I thought it was comprehensive and covered everything from the organizational chart, safety issues, and then how to set up the transition and make the volunteers still feel appreciated. So their ultimate recommendation on page 30 was to run a 24/72 shift. So, and that's with working 24 hours and then being off 72 and with 11 staff. So departments are transitioning to this model. I talked with several managers and fire chiefs that if they hadn't gone to this already, they were working towards it. And the savings on overtime led us to what would pay for additional personnel. And every chief and manager I talked with recommends starting with the shift that you ultimately want to run because employees end up being so associated to the first shift that they start out with. And I can attest to that. Several years ago in the police department, we tried to transition shifts and thinking it would be easier on their families to be able to depend on the time off and know their schedule so much in advance, aside from other overtime they would pick up. But it didn't work out, and we ended up transitioning back because they depended on the shift. They were so associated with the shift that they'd worked for so long and had depended on the overtime. So this 24/72 suggestion or recommendation is 4 shifts, and they have more time off that allows them to be with their family or work other part-time jobs. And often they'll work other part-time jobs with fire departments in the area. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, and I want to let Mike get into the reason for the recommendation more.
If I may.
Yes.
So just please go through and read this, but I just want to make sure option one would be the 24/48 for 8 employees, correct?
Yes.
Option two would be the 11 employees that we're talking about the shifts that you're talking about, correct?
Right.
Now, I just want y'all, if y'all would write that down, if you want to go back and look at, because those are the 2 options that I wanted to mention that this is what, option 2 is what's being recommended, and I think that's what Mike's going to stand up and talk about. And I just want to point that out because you can go in option 3, option 4. They did a comprehensive study. Option 5, these are looking at different employees, different number of employees, and things of that nature. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I just wanted to make sure everybody understood when they walked away with this plan, the real option that's being requested is the option 2 based upon the shifts. And then beyond that, for example, there is an option for 12 employees, correct?
Yes.
But just instead of reading it, what's the thought of why you wouldn't look at 12 employees?
Well, their recommendation was 11. We'd initially asked them to look at 10, 12, and 14, and 11 covered the shifts and put more employees on the shift. And our facility is more equipped for 11.
And so one of the things I do want to talk about, this is showing a summary of the options here. But I think if you scroll back, I'm just trying to get you to the point so that after this meeting, you go back and reread. If you scroll back, if I'm not mistaken in there, it'll show you the org chart.
Yes, it's on page 35 with the recommendation.
35.
Yes.
So there's your org chart for option 2, and then for the recommendations. And so that also allows you to talk about what the organization chart would be and how their structure would be set up and so forth. And so when you really look at it, their recommendations themselves start on that page 34 or 34.
Yes.
And then that's where you start talking about what they're recommending as far as option 2. Is that
Yes, that's correct.
all I'm trying to do is just get us straight to certain pages.
Thank you. So ultimately, between option 1 and 2, option 2 has 4 shifts, and option 1 has 3 shifts. But I'll let Mike talk about that unless you have any questions right off the bat.
these fire departments that this group has looked at it, you talked to it, you knew real well. Who are they?
Waynesville, Franklin. Um, I've got a list in my folder back there on who all they'd worked with, but
Cherokee?
yes, I think if they hadn't, they were maybe going to them the next week or something.
Well, the one group, somebody's worked with them previously. So it's Waynesville and Franklin.
Yes, those are two. There were several others, but between this group and the other consulting firm I looked at, this one had towns that were more in our scale of size of the town and size of the fire district. The other one was looking at places more like Wake Forest, Durham, that were, it was helpful staffing surveys to look at, but the closest one was Skyland.
Skyland?
And I also ended up selecting this one based on the price.
Skyland's been full-time for quite a while.
Right. They did a staffing needs not this company, the other company that submitted a proposal did a staffing needs assessment for Skyland.
I was under the assumption that all fire departments did the 24 on, 48 off.
No.
I didn't, that's not how it is. Used to be a long time ago, I thought. That was a long time ago. I mean, what,
It's a mixture.
okay.
And I will say, Commissioner Dietz, I do know Jeff Cash, the president of this company, and his son, Quentin Cash, the vice president. Both of them have been heavily involved in the State Firemen's Association, not here just in North Carolina and the Western North Carolina Firefighters Association, but nationally in some national accredited organizations. They're out of the West. They're here in Western North Carolina, and it is a good, solid company. They do a lot of good work.
I was very pleased with them and their report.
Did they do any interviews or surveys of the community?
No, they did not. That wasn't part of their scope. I gave them a very limited, please help us talk about what we need to know to set this up and look at a budget and recommendation on shifts, more from a manager and HR perspective.
Would this increase be a potential increase for taxes in city limits of Silva?
So we've not gone down that road yet, and the value of our penny or a penny on our tax rate is $49,000. We're currently putting in around $200,000 into the fire department.
This will cause you to go to how much?
If Silva funded the whole request,
No. If we refund it, how much is this gonna also cost the town?
so this is at Silva's current $200,000 contribution, and then also includes the 4-cent agreement that we have with Dillsboro and Webster.
So this don't cause silver taxes to go up or your budget to go up.
Correct.
This is zero to you.
Well, it's not zero, but as far as the increase in cost,
Yeah.
I don't, there's been, in comparing those two, there was a statement about overtime, and obviously having more employees, the 11 would be less overtime than the 8. But I don't understand this overtime when you have volunteers. Could you explain to me how that works?
yes, because we would still be paying people to cover those shifts. The point of going paid would be to ensure that there were additional employees to go to the calls.
Right.
And the that's what Mike was talking about the first time we came before you all with the decreased volunteers during their work hours or during the middle of the night, and employers that don't allow volunteer firemen to leave their jobs to go to the fires or calls.
Well, I guess maybe I didn't phrase it right. So let's say that the paid employees are on this fire, fighting a fire, and it gets to the end of their shift. Do they if they stay and continue fighting, they automatically get overtime? Or do volunteers that come take over and,
What we would do in that case is utilize, well, we would hope that volunteers would also be on the fire to assist or mutual aid. But once they wouldn't stop fighting the fire in the middle of their shift, they would finish, and then the floater that's discussed in this 11-person option, let's say someone's working a fire on Tuesday and they end up working over their shift. So their next shift that they were supposed to work, the floater might cover for them if they were close to the limit on their hours.
so there is ability to avoid as much overtime?
Yes.
Okay.
And let me add this analogy, or just describe it in this way. What this attempts to do, not just for Silva, but for Cullowhee, Cashiers, any of these departments that have chosen to go this route, this is saying we're going to hire these number of people who are going to be as highest certified as they can be to be available during these shifts to respond to calls as the fire department.
Okay.
Now, there'll be volunteer. You will never get rid of the volunteers, because there is no way 2, 3, 4, depending on how big your company is, there's no way you'll ever get to a point where those people can handle the entire call on their own. Now, there's some small calls, like a small wreck or a medical call or something like that, they might be able to. But when you get to a structure fire, it's going to be all hands on deck, and it's going to be all these volunteers that are going to have to be there as well. But what you're ensuring is during these shifts, these people, going back to what Commissioner Dietz has said in previous discussions, these people are going to be hired based on a standard. These are going to be certified firefighters. These people are going to have the skill sets. These people are going to be trained. These are the people that are going to be there to respond. Now, it's not like if one of those people are off, that you're going to have 2 or 3 volunteers come down there and just sit and fill in that day and take their place. This is a job.
Right.
So for this person to be off,
responsibility.
somebody else comes in, and that's where this scheduling works. But we are paying for these professionals to be there during these shifts and to work.
So my follow-up question on that, so we have these professionals and they're being paid, and say we approve this and they're being paid this much. When they work overtime, who pays for that?
The town. But we've built the overtime into the overall personnel request that we have requested the county for. But the town would be the one to pay them. They'd submit timesheets to us.
So if I may, there are certain built-in, and correct me if I'm wrong when I say this, in the shifting, there's certain automatic overtime. We think of overtime of just working over 40 and there's overtime, but there's causes that 24, 48 and how weeks shift. There's just automatic, they're going to get overtime. Is this a correct statement? Even if there's not any extraordinary
Right.
fire, just because the way the shifting is built, okay? 24, 48, and the way the weeks go together, they're putting in this overtime amount based upon how the shifts are. The savings is because the shifting's different, where you just don't have automatic overtime built in. Now, the reason I want to point that out is is in the discussion between 11 and 8, and this is something you and I we talked about a little bit. It's very difficult to switch back and forth between these shifts. Okay, if you go full-time 8 employees and they go in that 24/48, and then you try to shift to this new type of shifting, what it does is it potentially removes that built-in overtime, which is pay, okay, to that employee. So my point being is if the board moves forward with funding 8 employees, it's not guaranteed. It just makes it very difficult to move from the 24/48. Does everybody make, because an employee may get used to that built-in overtime, and then you try to shift them differently where you don't have the built-in overtime, it's extremely difficult to shift. Now, I'm going to flip that in this conversation. If the board chooses to go to 11 employees based upon what's being discussed here with you all, then I would hope in the future, if there's ever a conversation about going back to a 24/48, that it would be scrutinized. Meaning, if we go with this 11 employees with the shifting where it's got less overtime, that's where it needs to stay. I mean, now, obviously, that's a town decision, and it's a future town and board decision. I do think the decision here between 8 and 11 is really going to impact how you're going to shift from now on. Is that
Yes.
a correct statement? Does that make, because, ultimately, if you're at 11, there may be some point a desire to go back to the 24/48 shift. But then that needs to be a whole different kind of conversation, because then what happens is you see the overtime will automatically jump up here for 11 people, not 8, based upon built-in overtime due to shifting. And so I point that out just to get it in the minutes, that if the board goes with 8, then we understand that I think that really puts you in a permanent 24/48 shift. And you could try to change, but it would be difficult, correct? I mean,
Yes, because employees would start to depend on that overtime.
but then on the flip
It
side of,
confuses me.
I'm
It
sorry?
doesn't the rest of you, I guess, but it sort of confuses me.
This overtime.
Now,
I
I've
don't
worked
understand.
in factories and stuff myself.
Mhm.
And when I thought of overtime, when it come 11 o'clock at night and they come on and said, you're gonna have to double over, your man's not coming in. That's 8 hours of overtime. Or we got this machine's tore down, we're gonna have to work on it and work on it 4 hours. And that's 4 hours of overtime that they paid you time and a half for.
Mm-hmm.
But now you keep talking about this built-in overtime, it's automatically they're gonna have to be overtime whether there's even a fire.
Correct.
Right. Well, why don't you just make the salary there and quit worrying about the overtime? If it's built in and you know it's there already, why you keep talking about overtime?
Those Department of Labor.
you have to do overtime.
The North Carolina Department of Labor regulates what people have to work and how many hours and their compensation.
Pay them overtime or whatever, but why do you keep talking about we have to do it?
And these folks can talk about it, it's called exempt and non-exempt employees. There has to be a certain amount in the salary range. The government says that people who make less than this you can't make them salary. They have to be guaranteed the overtime.
On salary, if you know every month this fellow's gonna get 4 hours overtime or 8 hours overtime, why is that just not built into it?
That's what the law is.
It's against the law.
It's against the law.
Then we can't do anything about it.
No.
Well, and I know this is a different career in that non-exempt and exempt, but I've taught, for years, and I got a salary, and school was out at 3. I never left. Many times I left at 5. I got no overtime. I mean, I worked until my job was done, whether that was grading, cleaning up. It's hard for me to get a hold of why this, if you have shifts and you have time to work, why is there built-in overtime?
Go to Balsam Mountain. I've got people who work shifts up there right now that they're guaranteed overtime, because the only way we can cover the shifts, 24-hour cycle, with a certain number of employees is to guarantee that overtime. The federal law, state law says you cannot work those people without paying them overtime.
We don't have no problem with that.
No, I mean, people should be paid for their work.
Jackson Paperworks,
But-
I mean, there's a whole host. We go out here through this
Teachers don't
community.
get paid for
It's
their work.
unreal. Nobody works traditional 40-hour weeks anymore.
So,
There's a lot of overtime.
so I think we would have to have a dedicated meeting to this conversation, okay? Because this, I'm just letting you know from an overtime standpoint, it's not just, it is a complex conversation. There are different rules. There are different rules for firemen than there is, not just for me, than a county non-exempt employee,
Okay.
okay?
And that's why we got
There's different
consultants.
rules
I
for
see.
law enforcement.
No, I see, but I don't.
Okay, but there's different rules. I just want to point out that there are different rules for EMS work. There are different rules for safety people. Some actually reduced the amount of pay for overtime because they're recognized. Some increase. It's just a different set of rules. But simply put, when we start talking about built-in overtime, you see that calendar up here that's on your screen right there?
Yes.
Okay. 24/48. So let's just pick May 2nd. I work 24 hours that day, right? And then I'm off 48. Is that a correct statement? And then I work 24 hours that day. That means in this week, I have worked 48 hours. Okay? Right there.
Okay,
I'm
that makes
just trying
sense.
it's a little more complex than what I just said, but I'm just trying to
That
simply
helped
show
me
you
get, yeah, I see.
show
what
you
you're saying.
just in that what we
'Cause of
call
the shift.
24/48. I worked 24 hours on May 2nd. I was off May 3rd, 4th. That's 48 hours. Then I worked 24 hours on May 5th. And then there's your 48. But now get this. I could hit that 3rd depending on how it falls. It doesn't run 2 to 3. Is that how that? Can you ever get 3 24s in a week? Does it ever hit, or is it?
You
can't hit
shouldn't.
that 324 in a week.
Not often, yeah.
Not often, but you can occasionally hit that 3rd one. And so that's why I'm trying to tell you, that's what we
That's a
talk
lot more
about
than-
built-in overtime.
Get
Because,
time and high for what, for overtime?
what is that? Do you know?
Time and a half.
Okay. And so that's why I'm trying to say, just because of the scheduling, it creates that built-in
That was
overtime.
a problem, make how much an hour? Somebody better know, because we got the number, how much it's gonna cost us.
What's that?
Hourly rate. Grab this folder.
And did Bucket Brigade recommend a 24/72 or 20? If we went with the 11 people, it'd be 24/72. 8 people would be 24/48. Okay, I got
Yes.
that.
That's it. And then so what happens is it gives that gap more. You see it? I'm trying to show you
Sir.
that week.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and then that's why it reduces your built-in overtime. And then you have your other overtime, obviously, when people don't show up or when people
Sick? they
sick
wanna
or
use a
stuff like
vacation
that.
day, or-
That's a different
Sure.
set of
I see
overtime
what
that's
you're
not built in. Okay, it's just true overtime. And then, and any way you look at it, I think eventually we will talk about, just so you know, part-time in these conversations. Because I do know that's how other fire departments are dealing with some of this overtime issue, is having a part-time line item, right? That helps with not the built-in overtime, that's built in. I'm talking about trying to help cover shifts. You know, hopefully they can handle that with volunteers as long as they can, but if they can't handle that with volunteers, I'm just trying to predict the future for us that if you
Well, I'm
can't,
sure that'll happen.
if you can't, then
sure if
eventually,
you go
that's what's
part-time, ain't
happening
nobody
right
gonna
now with our
volunteer.
other paid fire.
Ain't nobody gonna volunteer for telling right to work, getting paid part-time.
Yeah, it still happens.
How much?
So I don't have a calculator with me, but roughly it would be a base salary of around $37,000 a year. So if you divided that by 26 pay periods,
37,000 times what?
divided by 26 for the pay period.
I tell you what, if let's come back with actual numbers. where we can come back
38,027.
with- Can we,
Yeah, we can do that. We can
I
do
can
that.
just bring back to you actual numbers?
Please.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
There are only 12 in that
Darlene.
month, right? Yeah, so it's, but that's where, so it's not the weekly, it's the 212 in the month. So it's the, I was trying to just explain like, but it is, actually, it's the month, it's not that week, okay?
So it could overlap during a week or two, but then you look at the whole month. So that
Right.
would make it more reasonable, wouldn't it? Well, that makes me feel better about that.
Let me ask a question about the millage rate that we had discussed, that little below 3 cents. Now, that would be on all the citizens of the county if we chose to do that. And that would even be in the Silver City limits as
Correct.
well. Okay, thank you.
So that's why I think it wouldn't be fair for them to raise their taxes and then the county come in and raise, they'd be penalized within the city limits.
I just clarified.
Yeah, that's,
And I think going ahead in the future, these are town employees.
Right.
And so they will fall under your benefits package. And we don't know what future implications will be for the town and what those costs would be to the town budget. So I think this current fiscal year going into, it's at this point, it seems like a zero-sum gain, but it could be in a future
Yes,
budget years, there would be increases.
definitely.
well, and I think it's always important for people listening in, but I remind myself, I am served by the Silva Fire Department. I live in Dillsboro, but I'm in the fire district of Silva Fire Department. So it does serve a wider area of the county as well.
Okay. You want to go ahead with the rest of your, do you have?
That's all I have. You want to talk about the reason between 8 and 11?
First off, excuse me. First off, thank y'all for hearing me out here. I want to answer a couple of questions that was asked. I was like, Paige couldn't look them up, and I could while I was sitting back there. The list of fire departments is on page 21 of the report to talk to.
You already.
Okay, but I'm just saying it is on page 21, the departments they went and talked to. The other thing, on the overtime part, if we go with 11 people, it gives them 44 hours a month. They've been calling back in for training, fires, whatever, that they wouldn't get overtime. They just get straight pay.
Oh, okay.
That's also in this recommendation. But anyway, so I'll carry on from there. First off, Brian's already talked about Quentin Cash and Jeff Cash and who they are. So I'm really not going to get into that very much. You already know who they are. Like I say, their main recommendation to us was for 11 people, which is option number 2. And that would allow the 24/72 shift, which would give the 44 hours in that 28-day period that we can call them back in and things like that for training, whatever we want. And that's a much better system than the 24/48 system with the 8 people when you read the recommendation. They go into that too, and it's a whole lot less hours you can call them back in on that system without having to pay overtime. That was one thing I want to point out. The other thing about having the 11 people, well, if we had a structure fire, and Brian knows how this works, you get 3 automatic and each leads, right? Well, every department now has at least 2 people there, Balsam or wherever. So say we had a call, our guys would be going, Colway said be coming, Balsam, Savannah. But if you add all that up, that gives you between 10 to 11 people, depending on what time of day it is, at that scene. And the reason that's important, that allows you to do a fire attack with 2 in, 2 out, like OSHA recommends. You still have enough people to run the trucks, and you have a command, which is a safety issue. If we go back the other way, we have less people to send. We could still get the job done. I'm not going to say we couldn't, but we'd have to cut out maybe a truck operator would have to double up as incident commander or something like that. That's not really a good situation. People seeing this know what I'm talking about. It's hard to do 2 things at once on a fire scene because it's hectic on a structure fire. And basically, you do need everybody you got. But like I say, it allows 10 to 11 to go to everybody's structure fire, what's Balsam's district, Savannah's district, Culloway's district. So it helps the entire county. It's not just us. The other thing And I want to talk about a little bit too, was the amount of call volume. And they've done, it's in the study too, they did a projection based on what's been happening over the last several years. And call volume's been increasing 8.99% for the last several years. I think it went back like 8 or 9 years. I can't say for sure. Which projects it out to where we'll be answering 1,208 calls in the year of 2025, which is what, 3 years from now. And that's everybody's calls we're talking about here. That's the county put together. But it's mostly stressing ours. That's the numbers I have. And up to 2026, we'll be at 1317. Backing up to 2021, we're 857. So that'll tell you what I'm talking about as far as call volumes and things like that. And that's why we feel like we need 11. And like I say, we'll cut down on the overtime. So basically, getting the extra 3 people, it is a little more expensive than the 8 people, but we're getting them for basically $150,000 or so, which is pretty cheap for employees now, based on what they were talking about there a minute ago, as far as benefit package and what you pay. And then again, like he's talking about, once we get locked into the shift, we're pretty much locked in. Because those people that are on that 24/48, they do get billed in overtime. It's like I used to work in a paper mill. 1 week you get 36 hours, the other week you get 48 hours. So you get overtime 1 week, not so much the next week. So you're up and down all the time. But, and I worked there a long time, and that's the way it works. Like we was talking a minute ago, very few people work 40 hours a week anymore. Very rare. I think the hospital works 36, and that's full-time employee for them, for example. So, any questions?
Any questions for the chief? Okay, well, thank you, sir.
Thank y'all.
Mrs. Fox or Mr. Adams, I'm going back to that tax rate I'm just going to say we had 2.9 and 2 point something else, 2.95, or there's 2 right there below 3 cents. All right. I'd like to know if that let's just say 3 cent per 100, how that would affect somebody inside the Silver city limits. I don't think it would go up that much. And I go back to my conversation with the insurance agent that said within the Silver city limits, an average homeowner, and this was averages off the top of our heads, would be about a savings of $50 for a homeowner with a better tax rating, which I think this would help the Silver Fire Department. Insurance rating, yes. I'm sorry, insurance rating.
Okay.
And a business could be close to $250 in savings. So it'd be interesting to know. I think we might find out that inside the city limits of Silva, they're going to have, with this insurance rating, that a future rating will be forthcoming. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Beck, didn't that there was a prevention of getting a better rating, an insurance rating the last time this?
Yes.
Because of the staff, not having staff on site, and volunteers don't count.
It would also go out in the county, because our rate would be out in the county too. Out in the
So it would be the whole district, okay.
Okay.
And it's not just limited to the town limits. It would be anywhere within their response district. The caveat to that also is Mike, help me on the rating, on the renewal of the ratings. Have we gone to a 6-year cycle?
Probably 7, but you can question somebody.
Okay, yeah, I think it's a 6 to 7 year renewal on being re-inspected unless you request a new. This could prompt a new inspection, correct? Okay.
So that would be savings for everybody in the district?
Correct.
Fire district, okay.
Which is better than I had thought earlier.
That's a great point. I'd like to ask Ms. Dowling a question. So these will be Town of Silva employees?
Yes.
Will you have like a certain like standards of, to be able to be hired?
Yes.
Like you have to have certain certifications or physical standards or things like that to be one of these employees?
Yes, we would do that for fire the same as police.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
Is the fire and police different, the standards?
Yes.
Have those,
They have those certifications.
has those standards for the firemen been put in place yet, or are they still?
No, but we've gotten recommendations on job descriptions and advertisements from both our salary study and from Bucket Brigade.
Great.
Is that in this report?
No, it's not included in this.
Would it
I think
be-
it says they've been provided though.
That help us if we could see those benefits sometime in the future?
That's something the board would like to request? I mean,
Yes.
is that something y'all could provide?
Certainly.
Yeah, okay.
And also, we're gonna try to hire local folks first before bringing outside people in?
Yes, we would
Look-
love to hire local
Yeah,
folks.
okay, good.
Other questions about this topic? Of course, we're not going to make a decision today. I mean, we're still learning. We're still trying to understand and gather information. Mr. Adams, talk a little bit about, I know this might be off the agenda in some ways, but it's part of it. Yeah, it comes down to number 2. I'm trying to jump ahead, I guess. Budget calendar update. Where are we at as far as when do we need to give you a decision? Talk a little bit about how you're going to move forward and when do you expect to hear our thoughts?
All right, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna do something real quick to correct myself so that, since we're taped and recorded.
Okay.
So, Ms. Fox, I was trying to use that example of 24 on, 48 off to show how it differs in weeks, but she did tell me what the rules are for firemen. It's 212 hours a month, correct? And a 28-hour, or excuse me, a 28-day period, okay? So I got up here the month of February. So generally, I can get exactly 10 work days in there, which is 240, or it could end up being 9, which is like 216 or something like. So that's why I'm trying to show you. It is different than the way I explained it, but there's potential that they could hit that 28-day period perfectly to have that built in there. It's not going to always hit like that to have that built in there. So I just wanted to correct myself. But going to your budget conversation, as far as number 2, the meeting calendar update, let's bring that up. So a couple things, obviously we've got, with this up here, we got today's meeting, the work session. Next meeting, May 17th, is when I'm going to present to the board my recommended budget. You can see that this is the meeting dates that we changed. We have May 23rd and 24th that we have special budget meetings called for. Now, just so you know, that's where we'll schedule people like Board of Education, Sheriff's Office, things of that nature, and the next day will be generally nonprofits, okay? So generally, that's what'll be on the 23rd and 24th. Now, we do have 6-7, the public, that's our regular scheduled meeting at 6, but we have the public hearing on the proposed budget on 6-7. And now we had scheduled 6-9 and 6-10, that's the Thursday and Friday for budget work sessions. But that's what we were going to bring up today, because what we need is we need those 2 meetings somewhere. If we can't do that on a Thursday or Friday, we need to look at that prior to that date if we can. If we can't do the 9th and 10th, our kind of deadline really, Brian, is around 14th, 15th of June in order for you to adopt a budget on June 21st. Okay. And so as far as decisions making, I really would look for the board. You really need to reschedule the 7th and 9th meeting if that's necessary. And that's when we need it, within this week and a half period, to be decided for us to put the budget together for you to adopt on the 21st.
So I guess what I wanted to understand is today is the 10th, which is a work session. We already have built into the budget calendar those special budget meetings where we hear those presentations. When will you present to the board the manager's budget?
17th.
On the 17th of May, which is next week. So you are going to build a budget based on what? Like, for example, these requests. Will you build them into your budget and then we would remove them if we did not want to fund them? Or
Yeah, I
how are
think-
you going to handle that?
I think ultimately that's where I'll have to include this into the budget somehow, until, and the board will have to make final decisions in regards to whether or not you want to proceed forward with it or not. So for example, the pool, we don't know the bids.
We won't know.
We don't know the bids for the pool till June 2nd, so I need to include that in. That was something that was voted on by the public. As far as I understand, that's something's moving forward, so I have to include that in on the budget. That's 1.6, almost 1.7 cents out of the whole discussion here. So I will, some form or version, have these other issues included in that budget for you to make decisions on. Yes, sir.
So just to give everybody a heads up and make sure no one gets caught off guard and we understand what's potentially going to happen here, then if you put that, could you please put that calendar back up you just had?
Sorry.
That next week on the 17th, you'll hand us a bound copy of the manager's recommended budget, which will include funding the Silva Fire Department, which will include funding the Glenville Casters Rescue Squad building, which will include funding the EMS salary increases, which will include funding the the Cullowhee Rec Center expansion. All those tax increases will be included in his recommended budget. And then it's going to be up to us to make a decision in the next couple of weeks. Do we want to leave it as is, or do we want to pull some of those out? Would that be a fair assessment? So that when that goes to the public next week, that's what we've got to make a decision on. The public's going to get that information, and it'll be up to us to determine whether or not we want to leave it in or pull it out.
Then we still will not know the true cost of some of these things coming down the line.
Possibly so. That's where we rely on contingencies and our savings fund balance.
And just to follow up, this is online now, this information right here, so that is part of the point of me putting all this information out there so that it'll show up in the manager's budget next week, but it's already out here.
That's good.
Is there anything else that we need today from a board? Any other comments, questions, any other items that you might need to see? I know there's been several recommendations here about items you'd like to see in the next couple of weeks to help us to make our final decisions. While we got the folks from Silva here, while our staff can gather this information. And if you can't think of anything right now, please, in the next couple of days, if you do think of something, let them know so we can gather all this and be in a position, because we need to, by the middle of the month, be ready to, at an upcoming work session, do this. Also, Commissioner Dietz, I know we've made some changes. If you'll put that back up one more time. We made some changes. Have you been able to look at your calendar? Do you know if that 6/9, 6/10, do we want to try to move that to another day?
No, but I'll know Thursday morning.
Okay, all right, well, we can vote on that.
I'll get in touch with him Thursday morning.
Okay,
Just
And
that,
that's one thing first, and on our regular meeting, what, June 21,
yes,
that's when we're gonna vote on all of it.
that's what our hope is, unless we have to delay it to the next week. That's why we sort of need to have some idea.
I won't be here. I'll be at the Houston Institute starting the 20th.
Can you give a look at your calendar at some point and give us some ideas of when you might be back if we were to delay that?
No, I'll tell you why. I got an appointment on the 20th, which is Monday at 8 o'clock in the morning,
Uh-huh.
and they said for me, plan on being there from 5 to 7 or 8 days. They didn't know. I won't even know.
Okay, okay. Well, we'll have a conversation maybe
Yeah, we'll
later
work it out.
and see if we can work that out then.
Okay.
If it's approved by other people, I'd rather not meet the 9th and 10th. If we could do it before then, would be good, but whatever works out best for people.
So what I would propose if, and we'll know after that, I'll put this on Tuesday's agenda.
Okay?
But what I would propose then, we could have a goal. Boyce, when do you have to leave again?
We'll leave on Sunday, I think, which
19th?
would be the 19th.
Are you gonna be, it's Thursdays and Friday, I guess what, if you would look at not only the 9th and, I guess we're trying to move the 9th to 10th, we need to look at, see what's happening on the 16th and 17th for you too,
Okay.
because,
Those would be good.
We could vote on it before you even leave, and we'll just try to accelerate everything.
because what happens is if we move that to the 17th, what I was gonna propose, if we couldn't do the 9th or 10th, is we've got the 6th, 7th, and 8th. And then we're meeting the 14th. It'd be tight, I know, that trying to get everything ready, but, you know, we could have day meetings there, we have one meeting at night on the 7th. That's the public you know, you probably wanna just start meeting, you probably
Well-
don't wanna make final decisions or direction until the 8th.
The only thing that comes into play on this, and I've already shared this with Don privately, I haven't said anything publicly yet, I have been summoned for jury duty in federal court. If I can get out of jury duty for the month of June, it's an 8-week commitment.
Oh, no.
So that's why we had talked at one time, we may have to shift our meetings tonight if I actually get seated.
And I'd like to
We
make
can
it
do
more
it at night.
complicated too. If, where I work, we're closed on Wednesdays, and I've been working double shifts on Thursday and Friday and Saturday.
Yeah.
So if there's any way we can do any of this on a Wednesday, and if it's copacetic with your schedules,
Yeah,
that'd help me out.
and, yeah.
Okay.
Then start, while we're having this conversation, I know we're waiting for Boyce to come back, you've already said you want to not do it 9th and 10th, correct?
If possible.
And then, Boyce, you're gonna look at the 9th, 10th, and 16th and 17th. And then, but it's starting to look like 6, 7, and 8. It's looking like where the days are lining up potentially. Cause I know what you're saying, the 8th kind of gives us a whole day. What you're saying, you're off that day, Mark, right? But what I'm saying is that if we can't do 9th and 10th, not sure about the 16th and we've got that 14th. It's starting to line up to be somewhere right in here, right? And then the other thing that I really need, if y'all think about this and maybe decide on Tuesday, maybe start really planning on giving us some time, 6th, 7th, and 8th, whatever it could be. Because remember, we're also dealing with the bids being open June 2nd.
Second. Well, let's do this. As a board, let's make a commitment that we're going to resolve all of these issues and come to some kind of final conclusion that first full week of June, the 6th through the 10th. And pretty much say this is what we're going to stand by and give staff a chance to incorporate everything. So if we had to, we could have a special call meeting before Commissioner Dietz has to leave and to vote on the budget and be done with it.
That 6th, 7th, 8th looks better for me. Selfishly.
Coat closet somewhere I can bring, put a cot in and just stay here.
And could we even, I don't know, this might not be good, but look at the 31st and 1st? Is that,
Or what?
meeting,
Of
the
May?
1st of June, yeah,
Yeah, if we have to.
if we have to.
Those are open. If you wanted to have some general discussion, that's a couple weeks after I present it. Those dates are open too. So 31st, 1st, 6th, 7th, and 8th. I mean, you're not deciding today, but just throwing those out for you can start considering. So 31st first, and then 6th, 7th, and 8th. You don't want to make any final, I would recommend not making any final choices till the 8th.
Well, the 17th, next week, the manager will present the budget.
Yes.
That gives us a week to be thinking about it. We'll get a chance to talk with different folks and see it in print. We'll have on the 23rd and the 24th budget meetings. We can actually, like you said, Giff, we needed to throw another one in that next week, we could, but that'd put us in a position, we'd have the public hearing on the 7th, which is required, and then after that, we can adopt it.
Right. If we're done, that'd be great.
Okay. All right, we'll work on that. Anything else on the budget? Items 1 or 2?
Just, Darlene was gonna give you the updated, you know, we've spent the last couple of weeks meeting with departments. It's just gonna give you the updated version of personnel request, updated
Okay.
version of capital and capital improvements request.
Just a few changes.
No real discussion, just,
Thank you. Thanks.
Your calculator doesn't have a minus symbol on it, does it?
Thanks, Darlene.
The first sheet is just the capital outlay detail, and there's minor changes on it. The maintenance department had the wrong amounts in it. I think that's the only thing that was changed on it.
Maintenance and what else? I'm sorry.
The maintenance department, the items had changed. And on the capital improvements, there was no changes on it. The requested personnel, there was some additional positions that was added in the sheriff's office that we hadn't picked up. And a name change on that green energy position. The nonprofit grant applications, we did receive a couple of additional grant applications in, and that's been updated. That's all the changes.
What were the two?
The grant applications,
Yes.
we had the one come in for the Rolling Star. It was on that one, and then the Center for Domestic Peace turned in theirs.
Good.
so if y'all look down, there's some dashes there. So the reach of Macon County, that's transferred over to the to the Center for Domestic Peace.
Yes.
But I want to point out, like the watershed and the couple other things down there, they haven't turned anything in. So from my end of it, I mean, there's a couple others in there that just haven't turned anything in, and all the information was sent out to all the nonprofits.
They were. It was.
Okay.
And that's it.
Any questions, Ms. Fox? If so, you can follow up afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We've already gone over item 3B, meeting calendar. I don't think there's anything else, Don. I think we'll get together after this is over with and try to hammer out a refined calendar and try to get that before the board next week to approve. Other business, Commissioner Striblin, did you have any items to bring up today?
No, sir, I don't, Mr. Commissioner.
Mr. Jones?
No, sir.
Mr. Woody? Additional items?
I would just like to mention that I appreciate so much y'all's willingness to have that monument put up in honor of the old Jackson County home. It has been installed, and with Bill Crawford's suggestions, And our staff did a very nice job doing that. Thank you so much, Don, for facilitating that.
Commissioner Deets, any additional items today?
Well, kind of on that, I had a person call me about the sign out at the old Webster School.
Mhm.
That school's named after Paul Buchanan. I don't know if you realize that or not.
I didn't know that.
The sign is sitting like this, sideways, and somebody had seen it and said they thought that was a shame. And I went by and seen Sheila, and I've not gone back yet, but told them we need to get that fixed, and if we need to help them with it, we can. And it just really needs kind of redone, and it's kind of shame for somebody like him, something be named after him, and it just looked like nobody cares, so.
Correct. Yep.
And I also, I happened to go by twice to at the health department where they're working, fixing around the flagpole.
Yeah.
If you've been
I
around
saw it
there.
today, yeah.
They've worked for 2 or 3
Nice.
days out there now.
Yeah.
That's gonna look really, really
Very
good. So
nice.
that's our people doing that, I think.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, sir.
All right. Number 4, adjourn. We'll eat cake
All
afterwards.
right.
All that want to stay and eat. Have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second,
All in favor, say aye.
aye.